It was a quiet afternoon in the city of Orange, California. Maribel Ramos, a woman who had twice stepped into the battlefields of Iraq, who had returned home carrying the pride of a soldier, now stood at the threshold of a new future. She was about to graduate, ready to turn her lifelong dream of serving the community into reality. Friends, colleagues, and her family believed her life was opening into a path filled with hope and light. But inside the small apartment, she shared with her roommate a detail so minor that most would dismiss it, became a chilling clue that something was terribly wrong. The bed, always perfectly made by Maribel every single day, as if it were still a military ritual, was left in complete disarray. A pillow had gone missing. Her loyal dog was left behind, barking restlessly. Her car sat untouched in the parking lot, and her phone remained silent. The contrast was jarring. A life built on strict discipline, suddenly disrupted by chaos inside her own sanctuary. To her family, these weren't oversights. They were warnings. Maribel, a woman who had faced war and death abroad, had now vanished in the very place where she was supposed to be safest. And the haunting question lingered in the air: who erased Maribel Ramos from her own life? And what dark secret was hidden behind the quiet walls of that apartment? Maribel Ramos was not an ordinary woman. She carried within her the steel discipline of a soldier and the warmth of a daughter, a sister, and a friend. Born into a hard-working immigrant family, she learned sacrifice at an early age. While her mother juggled 2 jobs to keep food on the table, young Maribel quietly took on the role of caregiver for her younger siblings. People would later say that even as a teenager she acted like a second mother, both strict and loving, keeping the family together when things threatened to fall apart. Her greatest dream was to wear the uniform of someone who protects her community. After high school, she started small, working as a security guard. It was tough, unglamorous work, but it honed her composure, sharpened her observational skills, and taught her how to stay calm under pressure. Then, in August of 2001, she made a life-changing decision. She enlisted in the United States Army. When the nation was shaken by the attacks of September 11, 2001, Maribel was deployed to Iraq. She served 2 tours of duty, living through nights of gunfire and watching comrades fall. In a place where life and death stood only a breath apart, she proved her strength. She rose to the rank of sergeant and earned the respect of peers and superiors alike. Returning home in 2008, with an honorable discharge, she carried both the glory and the invisible scars of war. Yet Maribel did not slow down. She immediately enrolled in the criminal justice program at California State University, Fullerton, determined to use her battlefield experiences to help other veterans reintegrate into society. Her vision was clear: to fight for those who had once fought for their country. Then came a devastating blow. In 2009, her mother passed away, leaving a painful void. For many, such a loss might have broken their spirit. But for Maribel, it became fuel. She resolved to live not only for herself, but also for the legacy of her mother. During this time to share expenses, she posted an ad for a roommate on Craigslist. Among the many responses, one stood out: Kwang Chol Joy, known as KC, a 54-year-old man who had recently lost both parents and was seeking a fresh start. First impressions were positive, quiet, polite, seemingly a perfect fit for Maribel's busy life. At first, the arrangement seemed ideal. Casey was unobtrusive, even helpful, tutoring her niece in math, going out to karaoke, walking dogs together, even treating her to an Alaskan cruise. He called Maribel the sister he never had. To the family, he seemed safe, maybe even kind. But beneath the surface, something darker began to grow: dependence, then fixation. Meanwhile, Maribel's own life was blossoming. She started dating Paul Lopez, prepared for her graduation, made plans for her career, and even dreamed of settling down and starting a family. To her friends, she was a symbol of resilience. To her family, a source of pride and hope. And yet the brighter her light shone, the clearer the shadow became. Casey's behavior grew strange, investing thousands of dollars in his appearance, hinting at romantic feelings, unable to accept her gentle rejection. Maribel sensed unease, but chose kindness. She never wanted to humiliate him. Still deep down, she felt something wasn't right. That unease soon turned into fear so sharp that she picked up the phone and dialed 911. Her words were steady, chilling. "If something happens to me, just know that I was trying to defend myself, and the person I'm afraid of is Casey." Later, those words would echo like a prophecy, a warning of the tragedy to come. On May 3, 2013, the atmosphere at the apartment complex on East Rose Street in Orange suddenly turned heavy. Maribel's car sat motionless as in the lot. Her loyal dog was left inside the unit, barking in distress. To outsiders, these might have seemed like trivial details. But to her sister Lucy, who knew Maribel's rigid habits, they were alarms screaming for attention. Maribel was the type who believed that if she arrived less than 15 minutes early, she was already late. Yet that day, she missed her campus job, skipped her weekly softball game, and turned off her phone. None of this aligned with who she was. The first person to raise concern was not family, but Casey Joy, her 54-year-old roommate. That morning, he contacted Lucy saying her car was still parked outside and that he hadn't seen her all day. Most people might not find this alarming after only a few hours. But Casey seemed oddly eager to file a missing person report almost immediately. His urgency felt unnatural, as though he were preparing for something others weren't yet aware of. Lucy and a cousin rushed to the apartment. The door was locked, no sign of forced entry, everything seemed in place. Yet when Lucy entered Maribel's bedroom, she froze. The bed, always made with military precision, was left in disarray. One pillow was missing. To anyone else, it might look like nothing. To Lucy, it was the loudest warning possible. Something was wrong. Police arrived. At first, they treated the case as a typical disappearance, but the details piled up quickly. The car unloved, the dog abandoned, the unmade bed. These weren't choices of someone who had simply decided to walk away. Naturally, suspicion first turned toward her new boyfriend, Paul Lopez. He cooperated without hesitation, explaining that their relationship was fresh, not exclusive, and that he was still casually seeing others. More importantly, he had a alibi. He was at work from 4 in the afternoon until midnight. On May 2nd, confirmed by his employer, he admitted to phone calls with Maribel that day, but no in-person meeting. Paul was cleared. Before leaving, however, Paul revealed something crucial. On the night of May 2nd, during a phone call, he overheard Maribel and Casey arguing heatedly through speakerphone. The fight: rent money. Maribel was fed up with excuses. She told Casey he had to move out immediately. Casey begged for 2 more weeks without paying. Paul backed her up, even threatening to come over and pack Casey's belongings himself. For investigators, this was chilling. Arguments over money and living arrangements often ignite violence, especially when mixed with jealousy and rejection. More alarming still, detectives soon learned that just 2 weeks earlier, Maribel had called 911, calmly stating that if something happened to her, the person responsible would likely be Casey, and Casey's own behavior raised eyebrows. He claimed that when he returned to the apartment around 9 p.m. on May 2nd, Maribel was gone, and he assumed she left with Paul. But Paul insisted he hadn't seen her. Meanwhile, witnesses recalled Casey sitting silently in his car, watching police outside the apartment instead of helping with the search. A disciplined soldier doesn't just vanish. A careful, punctual woman doesn't abandon her commitments. What started as a missing person case had now transformed into a homicide investigation, and all eyes were fixed squarely on one man, Kwang Chol Casey Joy. To understand the crime, sometimes you must step inside the mind of the one who committed it. Kwang Chol Casey Joy, at 54 years old, entered Maribel Ramos's life as a polite, quiet, seemingly harmless roommate. But beneath that exterior lived a man riddled with loneliness, cracks of instability, and most dangerously, a growing obsession that consumed him. Investigators digging into his past uncovered red flags. Years earlier, bitter inheritance disputes with his sister had escalated until she sought a restraining order, describing his temper as frightening. In 1986, KCC had been charged with assault and battery. In 1987, with aggravated assault. Both cases were dismissed, but the pattern was clear. Anger and impulsivity simmered just beneath the surface. In 2011, he was arrested for driving under the influence. None of these brought long prison terms, yet they painted the picture of a man prone to violence and poor self-control. At first, with Maribel, he seemed like the brother she never had. He went to karaoke nights with her, took her dog for walks, even treated her to an Alaskan cruise. He called her family his own. But the kindness wasn't selfless. It was the scaffolding of fixation. In the summer of 2012, Casey confessed to Maribel's sister Lucy that he was in love, that he wanted to marry Maribel and build a family. Lucy was alarmed, and when she warned her sister, Maribel admitted she had sensed his feelings but had avoided confrontation. Eventually, she told him gently but firmly she didn't share those feelings. Their relationship would remain platonic. That rejection, however mild, was the spark. Casey's behavior changed. He poured thousands of dollars into his appearance, new wardrobe, a tattoo, even cosmetic procedures, totaling nearly $12,000 to look younger. His life revolved around becoming the man he thought she would want. But reality was merciless. Maribel had moved on, starting a healthy relationship with Paul Lopez. For Casey, this was not just heartbreak. It was the crumbling of the only identity he had clung to, being central in her life. On May 2nd, 2013, tensions exploded. Their argument about unpaid rent wasn't simply financial. For Maribel, it was about boundaries. For Casey, it was about survival. Being forced out of her apartment meant being erased from her life. To a man already consumed by obsession, it was intolerable. His actions afterward revealed his unraveling state. Deep scratches lined his arms. First, he said they came from bushes during a walk. Later, he claimed they were from fishing line. Investigators noted the cuts were too deep, too straight, inconsistent with either excuse. Neighbors recalled Casey's talking about filing a missing person report at 10:30 in the morning on May 2nd, far too soon, as if he had already anticipated her disappearance. And when police arrived at the apartment, he didn't join the frantic search. Instead, he sat quietly in his car watching. Inside his apartment, officers discovered a pajama top, stuffed away, matching the bottoms Maribel was last seen wearing. Her DNA was found on the fabric. A scent detection dog alerted to the back seat of his car. Each piece alone was small, but together they formed a mosaic of suspicion. And then came his bizarre online behavior. While the community flooded social media and Yelp with posts hoping for Maribel's safe return, Casey joined in writing long entries about her, but often in the past tense, as if he already knew she was gone. Some brushed it off as awkward phrasing. Detectives saw it differently, an unconscious confession. From the brother figure to an obsessed man unraveling, Casey's joy had crossed the invisible line, where fixation turns lethal. And just days later, technology would reveal the final damning clue, one that led police directly to the canyon, where Maribel's body lay hidden. When every clue pointed toward KCC's Joy, detectives knew they needed something undeniable. The DNA on the pajama top, the dog alerting in his car, the scratches on his arms, all were compelling, but none formed a final blow. Casey still carried himself with calm detachment, even giving media interviews about his missing roommate. But that desire for attention made him easier to track. Investigators placed him under round-the-clock surveillance. Since his laptop had been seized, Casey relied on public computers at the library. Detectives disguised among patrons monitored his activity, while forensic software recorded every keystroke. At first, he browsed routine sites, emails, job boards, social media. But then came the moment that froze the surveillance team. On the screen appeared the search, "How long does it take DNA to decay?" That question wasn't idle curiosity. It was a man preoccupied with evidence. Minutes later, Casey opened a map program zooming in and out of remote canyon areas outside Orange. His cursor lingered over an isolated stretch of wilderness, far from trails and homes. For detectives, it was as good as a confession. Even as Casey sat in the library, officers were dispatched to the very canyon he studied. On May 17, 2013, under the searing California sun, a search team discovered human remains. A distinctive tattoo confirmed what everyone feared they had found: 36-year-old Maribel Ramos. Casey walked into his next interview, believing police were still grasping at shadows. He insisted she must have left with her boyfriend, denied involvement, even joked awkwardly. But when pressed about his injuries, his shifting alibis and the timeline, his composure cracked. Abruptly, he stood and stormed out of the interrogation room. Waiting officers moved in. On him, they found Maribel's military ID card, a personal token he had carried since her death. At trial, prosecutors painted him as a lonely, obsessed man who killed in a fit of rage when rejected, and then tried to conceal the crime. They outlined the chain of evidence: the 911 call, where Maribel voiced her fear of Casey Soeth, the pajama top with her DNA, the suspicious scratches, the internet searches, the canyon map, and most damning, his digital trail leading police directly to her body. The defense conceded that Maribel had died in the apartment, but argued that her death could have been from medical complications, post-traumatic stress disorder, or alcohol. They claimed KCC panicked, hid the body, and became trapped in a storm of circumstantial suspicion. Without a clear medical cause of death, they said the state's case was speculation. But the jury saw the pattern. Each coincidence aligned too neatly. Each fragment of evidence reinforced the next. In the end, they returned a verdict of second-degree murder. Casey Joy was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. For Maribel's family, the words guilty brought some measure of justice. Yet the victory was hollow. No sentence could restore the woman who had survived war only to be betrayed in her own home. Graduation day at California State University Fullerton should have been the brightest moment of Maribel Ramos's life. She had poured sweat, tears, and her youthful years in the military to earn that degree. But when the ceremony came, it was her young niece Giselle who walked across the stage. In her hands was a framed photo of her aunt. The auditorium fell silent, a haunting reminder that while Maribel's life had been stolen, her dreams still lived on through her family. Her loved ones exhaled when justice was finally delivered. Casey Joy was sentenced to 15 years to life, yet justice in this case was never enough. As one family member said, "He may be behind bars, but our pain will never be set free."
Mr. Joy needs to be put away for life. He is an evil man and a coward that should never be forgiven.
Every day they still saw the messy bed, remembered the abandoned dog, and replayed that chilling 911 call where Maribel had practically predicted her own fate. Behind prison walls, Casey continued to proclaim his innocence. He wrote letters to the court and even drafted a manuscript titled "Suspect Guilty Until Proven Innocent."
Family wants me to apologize, which I cannot apologize for something I haven't done. Maybe someday truth will come up. Maybe I just die inside the prison.
In his narrative, he was the victim of a rush to judgment. To Maribel's family, those words were not redemption. They were salt rubbed into an unhealed wound. This story does not end with a verdict. It is a warning about the price of obsession. When affection twists into possession, when love becomes a cage, the outcome can be devastating. Maribel Ramos, daughter, sister, soldier, fought her entire life for survival and for justice. Yet within her own home, she was undone by the very person she once called friend. If you want to follow more true crime stories where justice and darkness collide, stay with us. Because sometimes to truly understand evil, we must look unflinchingly into the darkest corners of the human heart. A 22-year-old young woman, carrying a sky full of dreams, was about to step into a brand new chapter of her life. Jasmine Pace, radiant, loving, cherished by her community and the pride of her family. Just days before Thanksgiving, grief had already struck. Her great-grandmother had passed away in the hospital. No one realized that this loss was only the beginning of a tragedy far more terrifying. On the night of November 22nd, 2022, Jasmine walked out of her home. She sent her mother a strange message saying she was going to South Carolina with a friend named Emma to spend the holiday. But something was off. Her mother knew Emma well and knew Jasmine would never introduce her that way. That short message carried an unsettling chill, as if it had been typed by another hand, cold and deceitful. The next morning, Jasmine was gone. No word is no sign. Then on social media, bizarre photos and videos suddenly appeared under her account. Everyone who knew her instantly understood Jasmine would never post those. Someone else was pulling the strings, controlling not only her silence, but now her image. And then came the chilling footage, a shadowy figure in the night, dragging a heavy suitcase across the pavement. But inside that suitcase, there weren't clothes. Inside was a horrifying secret, one that would unravel into an investigation shaking an entire city to its core. To understand the pain and injustice of this tragedy, we must go back to the time before it began. Jasmine Pace was not just another young woman drifting through life. She was a bright light in her community, a treasured part of her family, where love and loyalty were always placed above all else. After her parents divorced, Jasmine remained deeply connected to her mother, Katrina, and her devoted stepfather. They were even building her a new house nearby, a symbol of trust and love. While waiting for it to be finished, Jasmine stayed in the family's pool house, where mornings often began with laughter and warm conversations. At 22 years old, Jasmine was working for her stepfather's construction company. Co-workers and neighbors described her with words that carried weight: genuine, kind, never one to make enemies. Friends often recalled how on bad day, Jasmine would walk in and wrap her arms around someone's shoulders, dissolving the heaviness of the moment. That simple image captures her essence: a young woman filled with light, a light that would soon be extinguished by darkness. It was during this time that Jason Chen entered Jasmine's life. They met through the dating app Bumble. At first they were just friends, but soon their bond deepened into romance. Jasmine's family knew about Jason but had never met him in person. To them, he was simply the new boyfriend, part of the natural excitement of youth. In late October, the couple even traveled together to Chicago, posting cheerful photos as if they were writing a new radiant chapter in their story. But behind every seemingly perfect love story, there are cracks. Jason never introduced himself formally to her family. He kept a strange distance, as if he were hiding part of who he really was. Later, friends and acquaintances of Jasmine would recall that Jason often gave off an uneasy vibe. He was awkward in social situations, hard to read, and unsettling to those around him. Still, in the blindness of love, Jasmine either did not see or chose not to see those warning signs. Then came the night of November 22nd, 2022. Katrina received a message from Jasmine. She said she was going to South Carolina with her girlfriend Emma for Thanksgiving. But Katrina immediately noticed something was wrong. Emma had been a family friend for years, often spending time with them. Why would Jasmine introduce Emma in a text message as if she were a stranger? That was not how Jasmine spoke, not how she texted her mother. This seemingly small detail was the first red thread in a web of deceit. A text message that didn't sound like Jasmine, a fabricated explanation that didn't fit her life. In that moment, Katrina wanted to believe her daughter simply needed time away to process grief after her great-grandmother's passing. She dismissed the unease. But in truth, that message was the final warning before the storm. From a warm, ordinary life with family, with love, with a promising future, Jasmine had unknowingly stepped onto a path from which she would never return. On November 22nd, 2022, Jasmine was still full of life. That evening, she spoke with Jason Chen on the phone for more than 1 hour. It would be the last genuine conversation she would ever have. After that, the shadows began to close in. The next morning, Katrina received something odd. A text message supposedly from Jason to Jasmine, saying, "Hey, are we still good for dinner tonight?" The message appeared on Jasmine's phone, but was never opened. That small detail revealed something sinister. Jason was pretending Jasmine was still alive, weaving a false narrative to buy himself time. Thanksgiving arrived, the most important family gathering of the year. But Jasmine never showed up. For a young woman who cherished her family, who never missed a holiday, her absence was a deafening alarm. When call after call went unanswered, worry turned into dread. Katrina began searching through phone records. She discovered that on the night of November 22nd, Jasmine had been on the phone with Jason for more than 60 minutes. He was the last person to speak to her. A mother's instincts screamed Jason held the key. She called him directly. His answers were evasive, dismissive. When asked for his address, Jason gave her 500 Tremont Street. The family rushed there, only to find an abandoned construction site. No home, no Jason, no Jasmine. He had lied. A chill ran down Katrina's spine. Why give a false address? Why wasn't he helping search for her? In desperation, she remembered something crucial. At 2:15 a.m., hours after Jasmine had vanished, she had received a location pin from her daughter's phone. The family traced the pin to 110 Tremont Street. A neighbor confirmed Jason Chen lived in apartment 210. They pounded on the door, calling Jasmine's name. Silence. That was when Travis, Jasmine's biological father, made a fateful decision. He circled to the back, broke the lock, and entered with a pistol in hand. Room by room he searched, heart pounding, praying to find his daughter alive. But instead of Jasmine, he found her belongings, her credit cards, her ID, her suitcase scattered in Wason's apartment. Cleaning supplies recently purchased sat abandoned on the couch. When Travis opened the front door to let the rest of the family in, see the scene hit them like a nightmare. It was clear Jasmine had been there, but now she was gone. They called the police immediately, but the reason Travis had taken matters into his own hands was simple. He believed law enforcement was moving too slowly. In cases like this, every hour could mean the difference between life and death. From that moment on, Jason's carefully crafted deception began to crumble. The fake text messages, the false addresses, the unanswered questions, all pointed to a chilling truth. Behind Jason's cold mask was someone desperately trying to erase the traces of a crime, too monstrous to hide forever. And for Jasmine's family standing inside that apartment, it was the beginning of a nightmare that had no end. When investigators entered Jason Chen's apartment, 210, on the night of November 27th, 2022, it looked deceptively ordinary. A sofa, a dining table, neatly arranged furniture. To the untrained eye, it was nothing more than a young man's home. But seasoned detectives know evil often hides behind a thin coat of normalcy. They carried with them a tool designed to reveal the truth. Blue Star, a forensic reagent that makes hidden blood glow in the dark. The moment it touched the walls, the tiles, the carpet, the apartment came alive in a haunting blue-green luminescence. The living room, the bathroom, even the smallest cracks lit up like a cow filled with fireflies. It was not a home. It was a crime scene painted in blood. Spatter patterns sprayed across the bathroom walls told of a violent struggle. Shards of broken glass glittered on the floor, each piece a frozen shard of chaos. Cleaning supplies freshly bought sat scattered across the couch, as if Jason had tried to erase what he had done, but ran out of time. Then came the voice of a neighbor, filling in the silence with memory. At 2:11 a.m. on November 23rd, they awoke to a woman's scream, piercing desperate words they couldn't quite understand. Footsteps thundered across the floor above, then a door slammed. After a moment, silence. The neighbor assumed it was just another late-night argument between lovers. But now, those screams would be remembered as Jasmine's last cries for help, swallowed by indifference. Cameras around the complex revealed even more chilling details. Hours later, Jason appeared with his right hand wrapped in black fabric, his movements stiff. At 1:41 p.m., he was seen at a Walgreens nearby, purchasing hydrogen peroxide and bandages, clear signs of wounds sustained in a violent fight. That evening at 6 o'clock, he emerged again, dragging a dark suitcase down the hallway. The sound of its wheels rattled softly, eerily, as if nothing were wrong. But detectives knew inside that suitcase could be the answer to where Jasmine had gone. She was a petite young woman, weighing less than 100 pounds, small enough for her body to be concealed within. Later that same night, surveillance footage captured him once again at Walgreens. This time he bought rubbing alcohol, more bottles of peroxide, and a 6-pack of paper towels. He was desperately scrubbing away at the truth, but science would not be fooled. For investigators, the picture was now clear. There had been a brutal assault inside that apartment. A scream had cut through the night. Blood had soaked the walls and carpet. And then a suitcase rolled quietly into the darkness, carrying with it a terrible secret. The hope that Jasmine might still be alive was fading fast. Apartment 210 was no longer just Jason Chen's residence. It was the silent witness to a crime so violent, so merciless, that even walls and floors could not hold back the story written in blood. After the apartment at Tremont Street revealed its bloody secrets, detectives knew they had no more time to waste. Phone records and GPS data were traced meticulously, leading them toward a remote stretch known as Suck Creek Road, a place of thick woods and a river running dark and cold. It was the kind of place chosen not by accident, but by someone determined to hide a terrible truth. It did not take long. Within 30 seconds of searching, officers spotted a dark suitcase lying about 10 to 15 feet from the water's edge. When they unzipped it, it felt heavy. Inside, wrapped in 3 black trash bags, was Jasmine's body. Her wrists were cuffed, her body folded into the fetal position. And then came the wounds, more than 60 stab wounds, savage and relentless. So many, in fact, that the knife had broken inside her lung. The autopsy performed by Dr. Cogswell was both horrifying and heartbreaking. Jasmine had been alive for every stab. Her neck injuries robbed her of speech. Blood filled her lungs, slowly drowning her from the inside. None of the wounds were instantly fatal. Instead, she endured prolonged agony, bleeding out in silence. That pin she sent her mother at 2:15 a.m. was it her final attempt to cry for help. Even as the life drained from her body, the thought alone is unbearable. On November 29, 2022, police arrested Jason Chan at his parents' home in Nolensville, Tennessee. His hands and feet bore cuts, proof of the struggle.
He's a patient now. You're placing handcuffs. Not place you in arrest. You just policy. You go to the back of the car, so you can put handcuffs. Good.
Okay. So you said there was a search warrant.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. There's search warrant for your person. So we're Nolensville Police Department. We're going to be detaining you in compliance with the search warrant. We're assisting gentlemen.
Okay. And is there any like calls or anything?
Yeah. They're going to explain. That's it. Yeah. We're gonna let them do that, but I don't want to speak for them. Yeah, we don't want you to misinform you of anything, so they'll tell you all that when we get down there. So just take it from them. They're the lead on this. We'll let them explain it because we don't want to pile on information. We'll let them one time it all down.
Okay.
All right. So if you will, just face away from me. All right. Do you have anything?
But even more telling were the notes found in his room. They were not love letters nor apologies. They were scripts. Lies he planned to feed the police. Last time I saw Jasmine was November 19th. Last phone call was November 22nd. If they contact her family, what do? Each scribble exposed the mind of a man, rehearsing deceit, not remorse. The trial began in January 2025. Jason pleaded not guilty, claiming it was voluntary manslaughter. His defense argued Jasmine had attacked him with a wine bottle after finding Tinder notifications. But the evidence demolished that story. Forensic records showed no Tinder activity on November 22nd. Toxicology revealed Jasmine had no alcohol or drugs in her system. Worse, Jason had inserted his SIM card into her phone, sending fake texts and posting manipulated photos on Facebook to make it seem as if she were still alive. Throughout the trial, Jason sat stone-faced. He did not flinch at the autopsy details, nor at the evidence of his deception. The only time he shed tears was when his mother testified, begging for mercy, not for Jasmine, but for her son's futures. Her words stirred anger. There was no mention of Jasmine's life, no acknowledgement of her family's unending grief. On January 21, 2025, the jury deliberated for only 40 minutes. Their verdict: Jason Chan was guilty of first-degree murder. His sentence: life in prison without parole. Justice had spoken, but it carried no celebration. For Jasmine's family, the verdict was a cold comfort. The law had locked Jason away forever, but it could not bring back the warmth of her embrace, the sound of her laughter, the simple joy she carried into every room she entered. When the verdict was read aloud in the courtroom, silence pressed heavy against the walls. Jason Chan, life in prison, without the possibility of parole. But in that moment, there was no applause, no cheers of victory. Jasmine's family did not celebrate. They understood what the law could and could not do. Justice could lock away a killer, but it could never return their daughter, never erase the echoes of her screams at 2 o'clock in the morning inside that apartment. Her mother, Katrina, left the courthouse with swollen eyes. She later said, "People tell you justice will bring peace. But justice can't bring me my daughter's hugs." It can't bring back the sound of her laughter at Thanksgiving. It can't bring back all the little moments we lost forever. Those words cut deeper than any verdict. For families of victims, punishment belongs to the guilty, but the grief belongs to those left behind. Jasmine was not just a victim. She was a young woman with dreams, with love for her family, with a future waiting to unmold. That is what makes this story so unbearable. She didn't die in an accident. She died at the hands of someone she trusted. A betrayal so brutal it forever shattered the lives around her. Perhaps the case is legally closed, but it leaves behind a haunting question. Is justice ever enough when grief lives on without end? If you believe Jasmine's story must be told to honor her life and to warn others about the dangers of toxic relationships, share this video. And if you want to continue exploring the darkest corners of Key, where truth, justice, and human frailty collide, subscribe to this channel. Because sometimes only by staring directly into cruelty do we learn to cherish the fragile, irreplaceable beauty of life and love. Las Vegas, the night of December 1st, 2010. Inside a quiet home in a model neighborhood, a young man prepares to leave for his night shift. He is Nathan Paet, 28 years old, husband to Michelle, father of 4 children, and a dedicated serviceman at Nellis Air Force Base. For him, it seemed like just another ordinary night, one of countless evenings spent stepping out into the garage, heading to work to serve his country. But something unusual happened. The alarm clock, that had never once failed to ring, stayed silent. Nathan, running late, rushed down to the garage in a hurry, and just as he was about to start his car, the silence shattered. Gunshots ripped through the night. 5 bullets tore into his back. The young father collapsed right on his doorstep, his blood spilling across the cold concrete floor. Inside, panic erupted. Michelle dialed 911, crying desperately for help. "My husband's been shot. Please help him."
He's in a military uniform?
Yes.
Get the uniform off.
Oh God, he's shot in his stomach. My husband is locked in the garage. He's bleeding.
I need you to calm down just a little bit.
Oh my God!
Their children, stunned and terrified, stood frozen, watching their father's life fade before their eyes. In an instant, what seemed like a happy family life turned into a nightmare, shattered beyond repair. But behind the tears and the desperate pleas for help lay a darker truth, a sinister betrayal already in motion. And the person closest to Nathan may not have been the innocent victim she appeared to be. Nathan Joseph Paet was born on February 12, 1982 in Tamuning, Guam, a small Pacific island known for its turquoise waters, white sand, and warm waves that shaped the souls of those who lived there. From an early age, Nathan was the child everyone admired, cheerful, hardworking, and thoughtful. He had 3 brothers, Matthew, Anthony, and Eric, and 1 sister, Carmela. The Paet family was tightly knit, and Nathan stood out as the son who never caused trouble, the boy who always offered a smile and lent a helping hand. His personality was magnetic. Nathan was the kind of person people naturally gravitated toward. He was the life of the party, a boy who loved the ocean, loved to swim, and later surf, and found joy in the simplest things. But beyond his sun-soaked afternoons on the beach, Nathan also found something far more lasting: love. During high school at South High in Santa Rita, Nathan met Michelle Anonchuk, a girl whose gentle but determined presence caught his attention immediately. What began as a friendship soon turned into something deeper. They studied together, helped one another with chores, and shared their adolescent dreams. Their bond grew even stronger when tragedy struck Michelle's family. At just 16 years old, she lost her mother. Overwhelmed, she leaned heavily on her sister Melissa. But it was Nathan who became her anchor, standing by her side, helping her with younger siblings, offering comfort when the grief seemed unbearable. By the year 2000, Nathan proposed. Though they could not afford a lavish wedding, their families gave their blessing, and the two began building a life together. Their first son, Dion, was born soon after. The birth of a child brought both joy and new responsibility. Nathan realized he needed more stability, something greater than the modest income from his hotel receptionist job. With courage and ambition, he enlisted in the United States Air Force. His military career took him from Elmendorf Air Base in Anchorage, Alaska, to Davis-Monthan in Arizona, and eventually to Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas, Nevada. Everywhere he went, Nathan impressed his superiors with discipline and devotion. He worked as a weapons loading team leader and later managed logistics for combat aircraft. Colleagues described him as reliable, hardworking, and humble. To his fellow servicemen, he was a comrade to depend on. To his family, he was a husband who always returned with open arms and a father who longed to give his children a future brighter than his own. In Las Vegas, Nathan purchased a new home, spacious and full of light, located about 30 to 40 minutes from the base. It was more than just a house. It was the symbol of a dream realized. Inside that home, Nathan and Michelle's family grew with the arrival of 3 more children, daughter Niara and 2 younger sons, Drawn and David. With 4 little ones under his roof, Nathan's identity as a soldier was matched only by his role as a father. To neighbors and friends, the Paets seemed like the embodiment of the American dream, a loving couple, a growing family, and a beautiful home in a safe neighborhood. Michelle herself spoke fondly of Las Vegas, believing it was the perfect place to raise their children. But beneath the surface, cracks began to show. Financial strain weighed heavily on the family. Mortgage payments, daily expenses, and the natural desire to live more comfortably stretched Nathan's military salary thin. To cover costs, he worked night shifts and even launched a small program teaching simplified baseball to local kids. His body grew weary, but his spirit remained focused on one thing: giving his wife and children stability. Michelle, however, began to feel restless. The long absences when Nathan deployed to Iraq left her alone to juggle 4 children and mounting bills. The once fiery love seemed to cool into routine. Nathan never wavered. He believed in loyalty and the love they had built since their teenage years, but he could not see that Michelle's heart had begun to drift. Nathan was in many ways the portrait of selflessness, a man who carried the weight of family and duty on his shoulders, often sacrificing sleep and personal comfort. Yet ironically, all the sacrifices he made to secure a better life for those he loved would pave the way for the darkest chapter of his story. Because while Nathan trusted wholeheartedly in Michelle, she was already walking down a dangerous path. And soon that path would lead her straight into the arms of another man and into a plan that would seal Nathan's fate forever. While Nathan poured himself into his duty as a serviceman and as a father of 4, Michelle felt increasingly abandoned. His long deployments to Iraq, months spent away from home, and the endless routine of caring for 4 young children left her weary and alone. The spark of teenage love that once defined their relationship had dimmed, replaced by financial pressures and the heavy silence of distance. In 2009, Michelle's loneliness found an outlet in a man named Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, a colleague at the telemarketing company where she worked. Michael, known by friends as Sweet Rudy, was tall, charming, and dangerously persuasive. He was the kind of man who made every woman feel like she was the only one in the room. But behind that magnetic smile was a history riddled with kiwi. He had served prison time in 2007 for forgery and attempted theft. For Michelle, none of that seemed to matter. His attention was intoxicating like a drug she could not quit. Secret meetings turned into passionate encounters, and soon Michelle found herself deeply entangled in an affair. Yet she had no intention of divorcing Nathan. Divorce, she knew, would bring only financial ruin, limited alimony, an end to military benefits, and the struggle of raising 4 children alone. She wanted both worlds: the security of Nathan's paycheck and the thrill of Michael's dangerous affection. But Michael had a vision of his own. He didn't just want Michelle. He wanted money. And he knew exactly how to get it. He planted the idea that if Nathan were gone, Michelle would inherit his $650,000 military life insurance policy. Together, they could live freely, supported by a fortune that Nathan's death would provide. At first, Michelle hesitated. Nathan, after all, was the father of her children, a man she had once ignored. But temptation is relentless. Michael's persistence and her growing resentment toward the life she felt trapped in wore down her resistance. What began as idle whispers of what if turned into late-night strategy sessions. Michael also understood he couldn't pull this off alone. He turned to his friend Corey Alexis Hawkins, a hardened criminal with a record that stretched back years. Corey had been convicted of theft and fraud nearly 9 times. To Michael, he was the perfect partner. Corey agreed to join the scheme, demanding a payment of $20,000 for his involvement. The circle widened further. Corey's girlfriend, Jessica Austin, became part of the plan. Jessica's role was to buy the supplies needed for the crime: latex gloves, car covers, and air fresheners to mask the scent of gunpowder. Jessica also pulled in her friend Shannon, a woman naive enough to believe she was helping punish a drug dealer. Shannon's job was simple: to provide Michael with an alibi. In exchange, she was promised a cut of the profits. The plot was straightforward, chilling in its simplicity. On the night Nathan left for work, Michael and Corey would ambush him in the garage, shooting him before he had a chance to react. They planned to make it look like a robbery gone wrong by staging his body in his Chevrolet Tahoe. Meanwhile, Michelle would play the grieving wife, calling 911 in a panic while Shannon vouched for Michael's whereabouts. In the weeks leading up to December 1st, the conspirators rehearsed through text messages disguised as business chatter. The Van Dyke contract became their code name for the murder. On November 30th, Michael texted Michelle, "Hope you're feeling better. The Van Dyke contract is almost finalized." Michelle replied just minutes before Nathan left the house, "My husband just woke up. He's leaving now but running a little late. Sorry the contract has been such a hassle for you." The words read innocently enough, but behind them lurked death. That evening, Michelle returned home unusually early, a move noticed later by investigators. She woke Nathan, invited him upstairs to lie beside her one last time. Nathan, unsuspecting, agreed, savoring a fleeting moment of closeness before duty called. By 11 o'clock, he was dressed in uniform and descending the stairs. In the garage outside, in the shadows of a black Cadillac SRX, Michael and Corey waited with latex gloves and a pistol ready. Their nerves were taut, their breaths shallow. As Nathan stepped toward his car, he had no idea he was walking directly into the jaws of betrayal. Within minutes, the life of a soldier, a husband, and a father of 4 would be extinguished, not by an enemy in combat, but by the woman he trusted most and the man she chose in secret. The night of December 1st, 2010, lay cold and dry over Las Vegas. Inside the Paet home, everything seemed ordinary. Nathan, exhausted, had fallen asleep on the couch after a long day. The alarm clock, that had never once failed to ring, stayed silent. Unbeknownst to Nathan, Michelle had deliberately turned it off. It was her way of ensuring he would be late, aligning him perfectly with the ambush waiting just outside. Around 11 o'clock, Michelle gently woke her husband. She suggested they lie together upstairs for a few minutes. To Nathan, it was a tender moment, one of those rare gestures of affection that reminded him of earlier days in their marriage. He didn't know it was meant to be their last. Smiling faintly, he agreed, but soon rushed to put on his uniform. Duty called. He kissed his wife and hurried toward the garage. In the dim garage light, shadows stretched long across the concrete floor. Just beyond, parked a short distance away, sat a black Cadillac SRX. Inside were Michael Rodriguez and Corey Hawkins. Michael's hand clutched a pistol wrapped tight in latex gloves. The two men waited in silence, their breaths shallow, every nerve taut. The moment the garage door creaked open and Nathan stepped toward his Chevrolet Tahoe, Michael moved. Without a word, without warning, he raised the gun and fired. 5 shots exploded into the night, tearing into Nathan's back. The serviceman staggered, blood spilling across his uniform, then collapsed at the threshold of his own home. Inside, chaos erupted. Michelle grabbed the phone and dialed 911, her voice shrill with panic. "My husband's been shot. He's bleeding. Please help him." Their children, startled by the gunfire and screams, rushed to the doorway. What they saw would scar them forever. Their father crumpled on the ground, blood pooling around him, eyes fading as life slipped away. Michael fled to the Cadillac, Corey at his side. They sped into the night, heading for a safe location where they destroyed evidence, burning clothing in a fireplace, discarding anything that might link them to the crime. Meanwhile, Jessica, Austin, and Shannon prepared their part of the plan, creating an alibi for Michael. Hours later, he and Shannon would check into a hotel, pretending they had been there the entire night. Paramedics arrived swiftly, loading Nathan onto a stretcher and racing to the nearest hospital. Doctors fought to save him, but the bullets had torn through his neck and back, leaving no chance of recovery. At just 28 years old, Nathan Paet was pronounced dead. Back at the house, detectives Todd Williams and Lori Anderson examined the crime scene. Blood smeared across the garage walls and floor. A metallic scent, the iron smell of blood mixed with oil and dust, clung heavily in the air. Nathan's wallet and keys were still by his side, untouched. This was no robbery. It was a targeted execution. Neighbors offered their accounts. Several had noticed a suspicious car, a dark Cadillac SRX, idling near the Paet home earlier that night. Moments after the gunshots, the vehicle sped off. The description matched the car Michelle had casually mentioned, belonged to her co-worker, Michael Rodriguez. That slip of the tongue was the first thread that would eventually unravel the entire conspiracy. Meanwhile, Nathan's family, devastated by the news, flew in from Guam. His mother, Carmelita, wept inconsolably. When Michelle threw herself into her mother-in-law's arms and fainted dramatically, Carmelita felt something unsettling. The grief seemed staged, too calculated. Her instincts whispered that Michelle knew more than she was admitting. Detectives pressed Michelle for details. She claimed the family had been struggling financially and speculated Nathan might have had hidden debts or gambling problems. It was a convenient theory, one that shifted suspicion away from her. But the officers, seasoned in reading people, sensed something wasn't right. Instead of a broken-hearted wife, Michelle came across as oddly composed, too quick to bring up money. As the investigation deepened, the seemingly perfect family facade began to crack. Forensic analysis, eyewitness accounts, and digital footprints would soon expose the dark truth. The loyal soldier had not fallen to an enemy in combat, but to a plot born inside his own home. And though Michelle wept on command, the mask she wore was already slipping. At first, the murder of Nathan Paet baffled detectives. He was a respected airman, a father of 4, a man without known enemies. His wallet and keys were unmatched, which meant robbery was unlikely. So why had he been executed in his own garage? Investigators canvassed the neighborhood. Multiple neighbors reported seeing a dark Cadillac SRX parked near the Paet home before the gunshots rang out. When detectives mentioned this to Michelle, she slipped. Almost too quickly, she volunteered, "Oh, my co-worker, Michael Rodriguez, drives a black Cadillac." For a grieving wife, it was an unusual comment, as if she were planting a seed redirecting suspicion elsewhere. Detectives Todd Williams and Lori Anderson noted her reaction. Something about it felt off. They secured Michelle's phone and recovered deleted text messages. What they found changed the direction of the case in Marley. The texts between Michelle and Michael referred repeatedly to something they called the Van Dyke contract. It was a code name for the murder plot. On November 30th, Michael wrote, "Hope you're feeling better. The Van Dyke contract is almost finalized." Minutes before Nathan's final moments, Michelle had responded, "My husband just woke up. He's leaving soon, but running a little late. Sorry, the contract has been such a hassle for you." The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Michael was brought in for questioning. He claimed that on the night of December 1st around 9 o'clock, he went shopping and then met with a woman named Shannon. According to him, they later checked into a hotel at 11 o'clock and stayed the night together. Shannon was questioned and at first backed up his story. But when investigators pulled security footage from the hotel, the truth surfaced. Michael and Shannon hadn't arrived until 11:40, after the murder had already been committed. The alibi collapsed. Under pressure, Shannon broke. She admitted Michael had asked her to lie for him. At first, she thought she was helping a friend, but when she realized it was part of a murder scheme, she confessed everything. Detectives turned next to Corey Hawkins's girlfriend, Jessica Austin. At first, she denied involvement, but faced with mounting evidence, Jessica admitted the plan. Michael was the shooter, Corey his backup, and Michelle the mastermind. Jessica herself had purchased gloves and other supplies. Michelle, confronted with the avalanche of evidence, tried to shift blame. She admitted the affair with Michael, claiming she had wavered about going through with the murder. She even insisted she had turned off Nathan's alarm clock to delay him, hoping the plan might fail. But then came the most damning discovery. After Nathan was gunned down, Michelle sent Michael a smiling emoticon. Cold, emotionless, as if the father of her children hadn't just been slaughtered at their doorstep. For Nathan's family, the revelations were unbearable. His brother Eric said, "We lost Nathan, not to some stranger, but to the worst kind of enemy, someone inside his own home." His mother Carmelita recalled the moment Michelle fainted at the funeral. "I knew it was fake," she later said. "I could feel it. A mother knows." The Paets had welcomed Michelle as one of their own. Now they realized she had orchestrated Nathan's death, choosing greed and lust over loyalty. The betrayal cut deeper than the bullets ever could. On December 8, 2010, just 1 week after the murder, police arrested Michael Rodriguez, Corey Hawkins, and Jessica Austin. The following day, Michelle was led away in handcuffs. Each was charged with conspiracy to commit murder with a deadly weapon and firearm violations. The case was no longer a mystery. The loving wife had been unmasked as a conspirator. The charming boyfriend was revealed as a manipulator and a killer. And the so-called friends were nothing more than accomplices chasing money. The truth was as clear as it was horrifying. Nathan Paet, a man who devoted his life to his family and his country, had been betrayed and destroyed by the very people he trusted most. Now the question remained, how would justice deal with them? And could any verdict ever heal the wounds left behind for 4 innocent children, The trials stretched on for years from 2011 until 2015. Court hearings were delayed again and again, but at last the final reckoning came. In September 2015, Michael Rodriguez, the lover and triggerman, stood before the court. To avoid the death penalty, he pled guilty to murder with a deadly weapon. His sentence, life in prison without parole. When the words were read, Michael showed no tears, no visible regret. His cold silence unsettled the entire courtroom. 1 month later came the turn of Maribel Paet. Once seen as a devoted wife and mother, she now faced the weight of her crimes. She pled guilty to first-degree murder and conspiracy. The sentence, life in prison. She escaped execution not because of her own pleas, but because Nathan's family, despite their anguish, did not want the children to bear the stigma of having their mother put to death. The most haunting moment came when Nathan's mother, Carmelita, addressed Michelle directly in court. "Michelle, I forgive you. But the harshest punishment you will ever face is already here. Your children do not want to see you anymore. They fear you might do to them what you did to their father." The courtroom fell silent. Michelle broke down sobbing uncontrollably. But her tears, whether of remorse or self-pity, could not erase the truth. Corey Hawkins and Jessica Austin also pled guilty and received lengthy prison sentence. Every one of the conspirators was locked away. Justice in a legal sense was served. Yet for the Paet family, there was no real closure. Nathan was gone forever, leaving behind 4 children who had not only lost their father, but in a cruel twist their mother as well. The so-called American dream had crumbled into a nightmare of betrayal and grief. Nathan Paet's story stands as a stark reminder evil does not always come from strangers lurking in the dark. Sometimes it grows quietly, inside the home, fed by greed, lust, and betrayal. As his brother Eric said bitterly, Michelle did not just kill Nathan. She killed our entire family. And his mother's final words lingered in the air long after the trial ended. Maybe justice was served, but our pain will never end. In the end, the case of Nathan Paet is not just a story about a family tragedy, but a chilling reminder of how fragile trust and love can be. A man who devoted his entire life to his country and his family was brought down by the very wife he trusted most. Justice was served, and the perpetrators paid the price, yet the children will carry their emotional scars for the rest of their lives. And for his loved ones, no sentence will ever ease that pain. Nathan's death reveals a harsh truth. Betrayal is the most terrifying crime of all. October 29th, 2021. The city of Sacramento glows under Halloween lights, laughter, music, and colorful costumes filling every corner. Among the crowd, Leilani Bochamp, 19 years old, shines like a young crescent moon. Bright, kind, full of life, she had everything ahead of her: a loving family, a college dream, and a future waiting to unfold. But just 24 hours later, that light would be gone. Along Corral de Tierra Road in quiet Monterey County, a passerby spotted something strange in the weeds off the hillside. When deputies arrived, they found Leilani's body wrapped tightly in a blanket. That night, she had left a Halloween party with 2 friends, men she trusted, both active duty airmen from Travis Air Force Base. They told her they'd take her home. Instead, they drove her to a small house on Cascade Lane, Fairfield, a place she'd been before, a place that would become her final stop. Why would a cheerful, trusting young woman end up the victim of such cold-blooded violence? Who pulled the trigger? And why that Halloween night? No one knew that behind the playful masks and laughter, there was a real monster hiding in plain sight. And when the lights went out, secrets began to crawl from the shadows. This is the story of Leilani Bochamp, of love betrayal and the devastating cost of jealousy. It was the night of October 29th, 2021, in Sacramento, California. The air was charged with Halloween excitement, masks everywhere, flashing lights, bass-heavy music pulsing through the autumn chill. Leilani Bochamp, a 19-year-old college student from Carmel Valley, was radiant that night. After a busy week of classes, she just wanted to have fun with friends. To her, life was simple family laughter and a deep belief that people were good at heart. She could never have imagined that same belief would lead her to a small house on Cascade Lane in Fairfield, about 45 minutes away, and that she would never come back. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Leilani left the party with 2 airmen from Travis Air Force Base, Juan Para Peralta, 20 years old, and Damian Ponders. They were familiar faces, people she trusted. She had been to their place before, so nothing about that ride felt wrong. They said they were heading home, and Leilani went along. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. The next morning, October 30th, her phone went silent. No texts, no calls. For Leilani, who messaged her mom and siblings every day, that was deeply out of character. Maybe she's sleeping in, her mother Violet Bochamp thought. But by afternoon, that ethos became unbearable. The intuition of a mother rarely lies. Something was wrong. By 6 p.m., the family filed a missing persons report with the Fairfield Police Department. Friends in Sacramento confirmed she had left the Halloween party with 2 airmen. No one knew where she went after that. That night, detectives began the search. They pulled traffic camera footage, traced phone pings, checked local surveillance. Every lead pointed to Cascade Lane, the house rented by airmen from Travis Air Force Base. After that, the trail went cold. It was as if Leilani had vanished into thin air. On October 31st, while her family waited desperately for news, a call came in to the Monterey County Sheriff's Office, more than 100 miles south of Fairfield. A passerby on Corral de Tierra Road had spotted something unusual off the side of a rural hill. Deputies arrived and found a woman's body wrapped in a blanket, hidden among tall grass. Identification took hours. But when information reached Fairfield, the world collapsed for the Bochamp family. The body belonged to Leilani. The missing person case had turned into a homicide stretching across 3 counties, Sacramento, Solano, and Monterey. The Fairfield Police Department, Monterey County Sheriff's Office, and OSI investigators from Travis Air Force Base joined forces. A large-scale investigation began tracking phone data, vehicle movements, and witness statements. That evening, Halloween night, while children in costumes filled the streets asking for candy, Violet Bochamp sat alone in the dark holding her phone, waiting for a message that would never come. They said they found her, she later recalled softly, but she's not coming home. Back in Fairfield, yellow police tape surrounded the quiet house on Cascade Lane. Flashing lights reflected on its windows. What had once been just a rented home for young servicemen was now the heart of one of Northern California's most haunting murder cases. And for investigators, only one question remained. What really happened after she walked through that door? As they began to dig deeper, the truth started to surface, bloody, deliberate, and far beyond anyone's imagination. The small house on Cascade Lane in Fairfield sat quietly in a suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. But on the night of October 30th, 2021, something unspeakable took place inside those walls. When investigators from the Fairfield Police Department and OSI agents from Travis Air Force Base arrived with a search warrant, the air was thick with the sharp smell of cleaning chemicals. To any seasoned detective, that scent meant one thing: a cover-up. Under the dim lights, they found faint blood traces on the carpet, streaks wiped but not gone, and evidence of a hurried cleanup. Forensics later confirmed it. The blood belonged to Leilani Bochamp. The house was rented by Juan Peralta, a 20-year-old airman working in cargo logistics at Travis Air Force Base. His roommate Damian Ponders told investigators that Leilani had been there before. She was friendly, cheerful. She trusted Juan. But that night, Damian wasn't home. And by the time he returned, the house was heavy with something darker than silence. Then detectives uncovered another name, Jessica Quintanilla, 21 years old, Juan's on and off girlfriend from Pittsburgh, California. She was known for her fiery temper and deep attachment to Juan. In her phone, investigators found angry messages sent to him days earlier. "Do you think I'm stupid? You really think I don't know who she is?" And then came Marco Quintanilla, Jessica's 27-year-old brother, a man already on parole for attempted murder, wearing an ankle monitor as part of his release. When detectives pulled the GPS data, the story took a chilling turn. The digital record showed Marco's location in Fairfield early on October 30th, the same morning Leilani was last seen alive. Within 24 hours, his signal moved south, stopping near Corral de Tierra Road in Monterey County, exactly where Leilani's body was later found. It was as if his ankle monitor had drawn a map of the crime across California. Piece by piece, investigators began to connect the trio, Juan, Jessica, and Marco. 3 lives tangled by jealousy, pride, and fear. Juan, the quiet soldier too weak to confront the chaos he'd created. Jessica, the jealous lover whose emotions spiraled into violence. Marco, the protective brother who turned loyalty into complicity. Detectives also found surveillance footage from a Home Depot in Fairfield. The morning after the murder, Juan and Jessica were seen buying a blue tarp, the same kind later recovered near the crime scene. Under mounting pressure, Juan's story began to crack. At first he claimed Leilani had left the house early. Then he said he couldn't remember. But when confronted with the evidence, the blood, the tarp, the Jeep's data, he finally broke. "I didn't kill her," he whispered. "It was Jessica. She pulled the trigger. I just didn't stop her." Psychologists call that moral paralysis, when fear and guilt freeze a person between conscience and survival. On the evening of November 1st, 2021, Fairfield police and Travis OSI agents moved in. Jessica and Marco were arrested at their home in Pittsburgh. The red and blue lights flashed across their front yard as officers led them away in handcuffs. Their mother wept from the doorway. Halloween had ended. The costumes were gone. But for the people inside that house on Cascade Lane, the masks had just begun to fall. Because now the investigators knew who was in the room. They just needed to uncover what exactly happened when the gun went off. According to Juan Peralta's testimony in court, the morning of October 30th, 2021, began quietly. After leaving the party in Sacramento, he and Leilani Bochamp went back to the house on Cascade Lane. They talked for a while, played some music, and eventually lay down to rest. For Leilani, it was a moment of comfort. She was among friends she trusted. She couldn't have known that someone was already on her way there, driven by rage and heartbreak. That person was Jessica Quintanilla, Juan's girlfriend. Their relationship had been falling apart for weeks, filled with arguments and jealousy. Earlier that month, Jessica had texted him, "If you lie to me again, I'll find out myself." That promise would soon turn deadly. Around 3 a.m., the front door opened. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Juan woke up and froze. Jessica was standing at the bedroom door, eyes locked on the bed, where he and Leilani lay together. In that instant, something inside her snapped. She turned away, but only for a moment. 30 seconds later, she came back holding a semi-automatic handgun. She didn't scream, Juan recalled on the stand. She just said, "You took him from me." And then she pulled the trigger. The shot tore through the silence, a single deafening crack. The bullet entered the left side of Leilani's head and exited on the right, as confirmed later by Dr. Arnold Joselan, the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy. Death was instant. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Juan stood paralyzed, unable to process what had just happened. Jessica turned to him, trembling, but focused, and hissed, "If you tell anyone, I'll kill you too. Help me." In criminal psychology, this is known as the second stage of jealous rage, when the emotional storm gives way to calculated control. Jessica's mind had already shifted from panic to survival. Under threat, Juan obeyed. They wrapped Leilani's body in a blanket, tried to clean the blood, and early that morning went to Home Depot, where security cameras caught them buying a blue tarp. No one at the store could have guessed that they were preparing to hide a corpse. That afternoon, Jessica's car headed south. Marco Quintanilla, her older brother, joined them. He was already under supervision with an ankle monitor, a device that would later betray him. The GPS data placed Marco in Fairfield that morning and near Corral de Tierra Road in Monterey County the next day, exactly where Leilani's body was found. When investigators asked Juan why he hadn't gone to the police, he lowered his head and said quietly, "I was scared. She said she'd shoot me next. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would all go away." But guilt doesn't disappear. It festers. Psychologists later described Jessica as a textbook case of possessive jealousy, a person who confuses love with ownership, and when that ownership feels threatened, reacts with lethal intent. To her, Leilani wasn't a person, she was competition. The gunshot wasn't a spontaneous reaction. It was a twisted declaration of control. When police searched the Cascade Lane home, they found blood traces, a bullet fragment, and Jessica's fingerprints on the weapon. Everything fit together like pieces of a nightmare. That night, Fairfield went still. The house on Cascade Lane sat under the cold glow of streetlights, a valiant witness to what jealousy can do when love turns into obsession. From that single gunshot, 3 lives were destroyed, and none of them would ever be the same again. Almost 3 years after the killing, when the headlines had faded and time had dulled the shock, the Solano County Superior Court Courtroom Number 3 reopened old wounds. It was October 2024. Jessica Quintanilla, now 24 years old, walked into the courtroom wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, her face expressionless, eyes cold. On the other side sat Violet Bochamp, clutching a framed photo of her daughter Leilani, as if holding on to the only piece of her left. Beside Jessica stood her brother Marco, the man who had once sworn to protect her, now also facing his own punishment. Judge William Pendergast presided. Prosecutor Alana Shapiro, a sharp veteran known for her work in passion crime cases, began her statement with calm precision. This was not an accident. It was a choice, a deliberate, calculated act, and a web of lies to hide it. Shapiro walked the jury through the entire timeline: the Halloween party, the house on Cascade Lane, and the 100-mile drive to Monterey County. She called it a map of guilt. The prosecution presented the mountain of evidence: blood and DNA matching Leilani's found in Juan's bedroom, Home Depot footage showing Jessica and Juan buying a blue tarp the morning after the murder, GPS tracking data from Marco's ankle monitor, placing him near the murder site, the forensic report from Dr. Arnold Joselan, confirming the close-range gunshot wound execution style. Then came the star witness, Juan Peralta. Once Jessica's lover, now the key witness for the prosecution, he testified in exchange for immunity from prosecution. His voice shook as he recounted the moment of the gunshot. She stood about 6 feet away. She didn't cry. She just looked at Leilani, said, "You took him from me," and pulled the trigger. The courtroom fell silent. The only sounds were the scratching of pens and the quiet sobs from the victim's family. Jessica's defense attorney, William Allen Welch, tried to humanize her. He argued that Jessica was a young mother emotionally manipulated and pushed past her breaking point, invoking the heat of passion defense. He tried to redirect blame toward Juan, suggesting he was the real manipulator and possibly the one who owned the gun. "This is not the act of a monster," Welch said, "but the tragedy of a woman whose heart was shattered." But prosecutor Shapiro countered sharply. She had 30 seconds to walk away, and she chose to kill. For 5 long weeks, the courtroom watched Jessica closely. She rarely cried. She showed little emotion, even as autopsy photos were displayed. Her lack of remorse chilled the jury. Local media began calling her the woman with stone eyes. On November 13, 2024, after 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned. The clerk read the verdict aloud. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Jessica Quintanilla, guilty of first-degree murder with the use of a firearm." The room went silent. Violet Beauchamp wept quietly, her son holding her shoulders. Jessica didn't flinch. 2 days later, November 15th, 2024, Judge Pendergast handed down the sentence: 25 years to life in the California Department of Corrections. Marco Quintanilla later pled guilty to accessory to murder and obstruction of justice, receiving 4 years in state prison, nearly the same time he had already served awaiting trial. Juan Para Peralta, though never charged, was dishonorably discharged from the Air Force. He left Travis Air Force Base in silence, carrying a punishment that no sentence could measure the weight of survival. When the judge's gavel struck, the room seemed frozen in time. 1 life ended, 2 went to prison, and 1 would live forever haunted. Justice had spoken. But for those left behind, the true sentence had only just begun. The verdict was final, but for Violet Beauchamp, the pain would never end. Outside the courthouse, she sat on a stone bench, clutching her daughter's photo. The breeze from the San Francisco Bay carried the faint smell of salt and autumn leaves. She looked at the sky and whispered she wanted to make films about happiness. I never thought her own story would end as a tragedy. Inside, Jessica Quintanilla was led away in handcuffs. For a brief moment, her eyes met Violet's. No words, no apology, just emptiness. Some said Jessica shed a tear that day. Others swore she didn't. Either way, remorse came far too late. Her brother Marco followed, silent and pale. He had confessed his part, helping to cover up a murder, but confession doesn't erase guilt. He would serve his time, but the sound of that gunshot would echo in his mind long after the bars closed behind him. And Juan Para Peralta, the only one who walked free, was no longer the same man. Discharged from Travis Air Force Base, stripped of his rank and reputation, he disappeared from the public eye. The weight of what he witnessed and what he failed to stop would follow him forever. As for Leilani, the girl who believed in kindness, in second chances, in people's goodness, her story became a haunting reminder of how fragile trust can be. She was only 19. She dreamed of love, laughter, and the simple joy of being alive. But one moment of jealousy took all of that away. Because love, when twisted into possession, stops being love. It becomes destruction. In over 50 years of studying crime and human nature, I've seen people kill for greed, revenge, even pride. But this was different. This was a murder, born from something we all understand too well: jealousy. They sentenced her to 25 years, Violet said softly. But our pain, that's forever. So remember Leilani Bochamp. Remember her smile, her dreams, and the price she paid for someone else's obsession. If you've ever thought love means control, think again. Love sets you free. Possession kills. Share her story. So maybe, just maybe, no one else will have to die for love again. Otisville, Michigan, a small town where life moves as slowly as the ticking of an old clock in a quiet house. There lived Andrea Eilber, a 20-year-old girl whose smile could light up the dullest aisle of the grocery store where she worked. She was gentle, diligent, and hopeful, a young woman on the edge of a bright future. She had a boyfriend, Kenneth, a shy 19-year-old who adored her deeply. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary, perfectly safe. On the evening of November 14, 2011, Andrea sent a short text message. "I can't make it. Bring the DVDs instead." It sounded casual, ordinary. Even yet, no one knew it would be the last message she would ever send. When Kenneth arrived, the house was dark. The doors were locked. Her car was gone. In the quiet of that cold Michigan night, only the wind whispered through the trees, and it whispered that something was terribly wrong. 2 days later, police broke down the door. In the basement, Andrea sat motionless. In a chair, head tilted, a single gunshot wound to her temple. Her wrists bore the deep marks of zip ties, but the restraints were gone, as if the killer had returned to erase his own sin. When the police announced they had their suspect, the town exhaled in relief. But they didn't know the man they arrested wasn't the one who pulled the trigger, and the real killer would walk free for more than a decade. If this weren't a true story, you'd never believe it actually happened. In Otisville, a quiet town of only a few blocks where everyone knows each other, the disappearance of a girl like Andrea Eilber could never go unnoticed. Andrea was born in 1991 in Flint, Michigan. Her mother passed away when she was little, leaving behind a silence that followed her for years. Her father later remarried, and Andrea learned to rebuild her life with patience and grace. After high school, she started working at a local supermarket. Every morning she made coffee for her dad, greeted the neighbors, and went to work in her clean white sneakers. People remembered her as the girl with kind eyes who always seemed to be dreaming of a peaceful future. That's where she met Kenneth, a 19-year-old co-worker, shy, awkward, and kind. Their relationship blossomed slowly, quietly, the way young love often does, tender and hopeful, untouched by darkness. In November 2011, Andrea's aunt and uncle went out of town and asked her to house sit. The house was in a quiet neighborhood, just a few miles from downtown. She decided to stay there for a few days. Kenneth often came over. They'd watch movies, eat pizza, talk about Christmas plans. Friends said Andrea looked happy, relaxed, completely normal. Then came the night of November 14th. Kenneth was supposed to pick her up around 7, but just before he left, he got a text, "I can't come. Bring some movie DVDs instead." It was short, oddly cold for someone who usually added heart emojis to her messages. Kenneth thought it was strange, but he went anyway. He arrived around 7:30. The house was pitch dark. No lights, no car, no sound. He called, texted, knocked, nothing. Finally, he sat in his car watching the silent house, waiting. 30 minutes later, another text came in. Plans changed. See you tomorrow. It was calm. Too calm. Kenneth didn't know it yet, but that message was the last desperate echo of a life already slipping away. The next day, Kenneth waited. No calls, no replies. He figured she was upset, maybe needed space. But when Andrea's father couldn't reach her either, the unease began to grow. By the following evening, fear replaced reason. Family and friends divided into search groups, driving through nearby towns, gas stations, and parks, hoping to find a sign of her. That night, One of Andrea's friends spotted her silver Chevy Malibu, parked deep inside a wooded area near a national park in Davison. The doors were unlocked. The keys were missing. Andrea was gone. Her father called the police immediately. Officers arrived at her aunt and uncle's house and, with permission, forced the door open. Upstairs, nothing. But when one of them walked down into the basement, the flashlight froze on something that made his blood run cold. Andrea sat on a chair, her head slumped to one side, a single gunshot wound in her temple. The faint smell of gunpowder still lingered. Her wrists showed marked zip ties that had been cut. Forensic experts later determined the restraints had been removed 6 to 7 hours after her death, meaning the killer either returned later or stayed in the house all night, watching her lifeless body. There was no sign of forced entry, and what was missing made no sense. A bottle of perfume, a sweater, a camera, 3 knives, a rifle, some bullets, and a small amount of cash. Jewelry, gold, and even her phone were untouched. This wasn't a robbery. It was something colder, more deliberate, a crime wrapped in calculation. When detectives reviewed Andrea's life, only one person seemed close enough, emotional enough to have a reason: her boyfriend, Kenneth. Louise's voice turns low, deliberate. When a kind girl dies inside a locked house, suspicion always falls on the one who loved her most. Because in love, the line between tenderness and destruction is often just one wrong heartbeat. When police arrived at the scene of Andrea Eilber's murder, every glance turned toward one person: Kenneth. He was the last person to have plans with her, the one who showed up that night. And in the eyes of investigators, he had both motive and opportunity. And maybe most importantly, Kenneth was young, naive, the kind of suspect who might crack under pressure. From the very beginning, Kenneth cooperated completely. He gave officers his DNA fingerprints, the clothes he wore on November 14th, and even agreed to take a polygraph test. He didn't hire a lawyer, didn't hesitate, didn't hide. Sitting in the interrogation room, Kenneth explained everything: how he had waited outside the house for 30 minutes, how Andrea texted that her plans had changed, how he eventually drove away. But the detectives didn't see honesty. They saw opportunity. They asked the same questions over and over. Why didn't you go inside? Why didn't you call the police when she disappeared? Every answer only deepened their suspicion. They needed a killer, and a boyfriend, suddenly rejected, was the perfect fit for their story. Soon they began collecting inconsistencies. Kenneth admitted he'd sat in his car outside Andrea's house for half an hour, a time frame that, according to forensics, matched the estimated time of death. He had given the wrong address to a friend who was helping search for Andrea, and he didn't join the search the next day, saying he had to work early. To investigators, it was enough to paint guilt. But the truth told a very different story. Phone records revealed that after Kenneth left Andrea's house around 9:40 p.m., his phone connected to a tower near a gas station between there and another town. Surveillance footage showed him at the station, calm, alone, buying snacks. Around 10 o'clock, Kenneth was seen at a female friend's apartment, where 2 witnesses confirmed he stayed until midnight, watching a movie. At almost the exact same time, just 7 minutes after he arrived there, someone withdrew $300 from Andrea's ATM card in Davison, a town nearly 30 miles away. He couldn't possibly have been in both places. The evidence should have cleared him. Instead, detectives ignored it. The investigation had already chosen its villain. The next morning, Kenneth tried calling Andrea again. No answer. He drove back to the house around 10 a.m., knocked, waited. No sound. He left around 11, just as another withdrawal of $300 appeared from Andrea's bank account in yet another town even farther away. Security footage showed a man driving a white pickup truck using her card. Not Kenneth, not even close. Still, the detectives refused to let go. To them, logic mattered less than closure. If it wasn't Kenneth, who else could it be? After 10 hours of relentless interrogation, Kenneth was exhausted, dehydrated, emotionally crushed. One detective slid a sheet of paper across the table. "Just write down what happened when you found her," he said. "Say she was already dead. Say you tried to cover it up. Then you can go home." Kenneth, desperate to end the nightmare, wrote a few shaky lines that he had found Andrea's body and, afraid her family would think she took her own life, tried to stage it as a murder. When he signed, the detective smiled. "Congratulations," he said. "You just confessed to murder." Kenneth froze. He begged to retract his statement, but it was too late. That vague, exhausted note became the cornerstone of the case against him. What made it worse, his lawyer was right outside the station. Kenneth's grandfather had hired one and sent him immediately. But officers refused to reveal Kenneth's location, even hung up when the lawyer called. For 12 hours, Kenneth sat inside alone, unaware that help was knocking at the door. The next morning, police announced they had their killer. The town sighed in relief. And Kenneth, once the shy boy in love, was paraded before cameras as the jealous boyfriend who murdered his girlfriend. Louise's voice turns cold, deliberate. Police needed a killer. And when they couldn't find the real one, they built one. Because sometimes justice doesn't care about the truth. It just needs someone to blame. May 2015. 4 years had passed since Andrea's death when the trial of Kenneth finally began. Inside the Genesee County courtroom, the air was thick with tension and bias. Local news outlets had already branded it the cold-hearted boyfriend murder case. And the prosecutor opened with a line that would echo in every headline. This is the story of a boy who couldn't handle rejection and decided that if he couldn't have her, no one would. No DNA matched. No witnesses existed. All they had were 2 fragile pieces of evidence, a coerced confession, and a single strand of bloody hair. In court, the prosecution played snippets of Kenneth's interrogation video, stopping exactly at the line where he said, "I saw her ceasing there." They paused, letting silence do the rest, and told the jury, that's his admission of guilt. The parts where Kenneth said, "I didn't do anything," or "you're pressuring me," those sections had conveniently gone missing due to what police called a technical malfunction. The defense protested, arguing that Kenneth had been exhausted, dehydrated, and denied legal counsel, but the court shrugged it off. No one forced him to sign, the prosecutor said. But anyone who's ever been broken down for 10 hours under relentless questioning knows a desperate mind will say anything just to go home. An officer testified that he had found a single bloody hair on Kenneth's pants from the night Andrea disappeared. At first glance, it seemed damning physical proof. But the forensic report told a different story. There was no other trace of blood on the pants. Not a droplet. Not a microscopic speck. If Kenneth had been wearing them during the shooting, blood spatter would have been unavoidable. The forensic analyst concluded that the hair must have landed on the pants hours after Andrea's death, likely through contamination. After all, police had seized Kenneth's clothing just 30 minutes after discovering the body, when officers were still covered in trace evidence from the crime scene. Yet the prosecution dismissed the science, holding the hair up before the jury and saying, "You don't need to be a scientist to see what's in front of you." And the jurors, ordinary people untrained in forensics, believed what they could see. DNA found under Andrea's fingernails didn't match Kenneth. The DNA inside her car didn't match either. Her father testified that the car leaked oil, leaving stains on the driver's shoes, and Kenneth's boots had none. But those inconsistencies were swept aside. The prosecutor presented a new narrative. Kenneth killed Andrea out of jealousy, then staged a fake robbery to cover it up. When asked about motive, he simply said, "You don't need a motive when a heart is broken." He ended his argument by showing two photos side by side, Andrea smiling radiant and Kenneth in his jail uniform, expressionless. The contrast did the rest. The jury didn't need science. They had emotion. After 2 days of deliberation, the verdict came: guilty of first-degree murder. Life in prison without parole. Kenneth's father collapsed. His mother sobbed uncontrollably. Kenneth stood silent, blank-eyed, as if watching his life drift away from behind glass. Outside the courthouse, people clapped. Reporters shouted. No one heard the forensic expert whisper, "The DNA doesn't match." Justice had made up its mind. And with that verdict, the door to the truth slammed shut. Kenneth served 3 years in prison, then another 4 under strict house arrest. In 2018, his attorney discovered a clerical error in the jury paperwork. For the charge of second-degree murder, there was only one checkbox: guilty. No option for not guilty. The appeals court couldn't ignore it. Kenneth was granted a new trial. For the first time, a flicker of light cut through the darkness. But no one yet knew that it would take 11 more years and a strand of DNA to finally uncover the truth. Louis's voice low and steady. Sometimes justice doesn't fail, it simply falls asleep. The tragedy is when it finally wakes up. Too many innocent lives have already been lost in its dreams. Time moved slowly like a sentence without an end. 11 years had passed since that November night when Andrea Eilber was murdered and Kenneth still lived in limbo, half free, half imprisoned. He wore an electronic ankle monitor, confined by invisible walls, and every step was a reminder that freedom was just another kind of cage. The media had moved on. The police stayed silent. But his attorney refused to let the story die. He believed that only science, the kind that doesn't lie, could set Kenneth free. In 2022, after years of petitions, the defense finally convinced authorities to reopen the DNA evidence. Technology had advanced. New sequencing methods could now analyze genetic fragments far smaller than before. Forensic experts revisited every trace the skin cells found beneath Andrea's fingernails, a strand of hair, and a cigarette butt discovered near the porch. The results were astonishing. All 3 contained the same unknown male DNA profile. It didn't match Kenneth or anyone in the FBI database. So investigators reached out to a company called Othram Specialists in Forensic Genetic Genealogy to track the suspect through family DNA connections. That's when the case, long buried in dust, began to breathe again. In January 2023, Othram's analysts traced the DNA to a 42-year-old man named Chadwick Moley. Back in 2011, he had lived just 40 minutes from Otisville. His record was stained with petty theft, alcohol abuse, and violence, but nothing as brutal as murder. Detectives pulled his old phone records and found something chilling. On the night Andrea was killed, Chadwick's phone pinged 23 times from a cell tower near her aunt and uncle's house. Not once, not twice, 23 times. The pattern was undeniable. By the time police tracked him down, Chadwick was living in Utah, working odd delivery jobs and sleeping in a silver van. He kept to himself, quiet, isolated, unpredictable. For 2 months, officers shadowed him, trying to collect discarded items for DNA. But Chadwick was careful. He left nothing behind. Finally, they decided to confront him head-on. One winter morning, officers approached his van with a warrant and asked for a sample. Chadwick gave a weary smirk. "I don't even know anyone named Andrea," he said. 2 weeks later, the lab results came back, and the truth was undeniable. Chadwick's DNA matched the skin under Andrea's fingernails, the cigarette butt outside the house, and the samples found inside her car. Then came the final nail in the coffin inside his van. Police found a revolver. Ballistics confirmed it was the very weapon used to kill Andrea. When Chadwick realized what they had, he ran. He drove north through fields, mountains, and frozen highways all the way to Montana, near the Canadian border. He was captured without resistance, but on the way back while being transported to the airport, he escaped, freeing himself from both handcuffs and leg irons, disappearing into the forest. 3 days later, a sheriff spotted a man paddling down a river in a canoe, his face, pale eyes empty. It was Chadwick. When they surrounded him, he didn't fight. He simply said, "I guess you already know everything." In court, Chadwick claimed he had been drunk that night and couldn't remember what happened. He entered a no contest plea, not admitting guilt, but not denying it either. The court sentenced him to life in prison without parole. But for Kenneth, freedom still didn't come. Even after Chadwick's conviction, prosecutors insisted they would retry Kenneth, suggesting that both men may have been involved. It was absurd. Chadwick had said he'd never met Kenneth or Andrea. Yet the system that once imprisoned an innocent man, couldn't bear to admit it, had been wrong. Kenneth remained at home under surveillance, trapped in silence, a man acquitted by DCFA but still imprisoned by Paet. Science found the killer. But justice couldn't find the courage to say, "We were wrong." Because sometimes the truth isn't feared for what it reveals, it's feared for what it proves. Nearly 14 years have passed since that night. The house Andrea Eilber was watching for her aunt and uncle has been repainted. The basement sealed off. But for the people of Otisville, that place still hums with unease, a reminder of a girl taken too soon, and a justice system that lost its way. And Kenneth, once branded the cold-hearted boyfriend, now lives quietly, almost invisibly. The ankle monitor he still wears is no longer a device of control, but a scar made of metal and memory, a symbol of everything stolen from him: his youth, his name, his faith in fairness. When Chadwick Moley was finally sentenced to life in prison, Kenneth didn't attend the hearing. But his lawyer said that when he heard the news, Kenneth simply sat still for a long time, then whispered, "At least she can rest now." "I still can't." Luis's voice slows, heavy with reflection. In this story, there are two victims, one who lost her life and one who lost his. But only one killer and one system that let him walk free for more than a decade. Chadwick confessed. The police admitted their mistakes. But Kenneth remains under supervision, as if justice fears its own shadow. His attorney once said, he doesn't need forgiveness. He needs back the years that were stolen from him. The screen fades to black, leaving only Luis's voice, soft, steady, unrelenting. Andrea is gone. Chadwick will die in prison. But Kenneth is still waiting to be free. Maybe the greatest crime isn't murder itself, but the refusal to admit we were wrong. If you believe justice deserves a second look, share this story. Because sometimes the only thing standing between truth and tragedy is someone willing to listen.